What happens when a mastermind spends 20 years building the perfect trap, only to realize the predator was already sitting inside it? For 2 decades, the greatest military secret in the Middle East was not the weapons hidden beneath the earth, but the fact that they were hidden at all. If you want to uncover the hidden truths behind global power struggles before anyone else does, hit that like button, follow to the page, and share this video with a friend who loves deep geopolitical analysis. To understand the magnitude of what went wrong, you first have to understand the sheer scale of what was built. Deep beneath the hard rock and salt formations of Qushm Island, a massive subterranean world was carved out by hand and machine. Qushm is not just any piece of land. It is the largest island in the Persian Gulf. And more importantly, it sits directly inside the Strait of Hormuz. This is the most critical maritime choke point on the planet. Any weapon placed on this island can strike ships in the narrow shipping lanes before they even have time to react. For 20 years, the strategy was simple but brilliant: dig deep, hide everything, keep the doors locked. The Iranian military spent billions of dollars and countless hours drilling into the solid earth. They created a vast network of tunnels, storage depots, command centers, and launch facilities. They filled these underground caverns with anti-ship cruise missiles, fast attack boats, and the communication equipment needed to coordinate a massive strike. But the true weapon was not the missiles. The true weapon was the silence. The commanders maintained strict electronic discipline. They kept their radars turned off. They kept their radios quiet. They ensured that no heat signatures, no radio waves, and no electronic signals escaped the tunnels. The most advanced spy satellites and surveillance aircraft in the world flew overhead every single day, but they saw nothing. They heard nothing. The sealed doors were the ultimate shield. The logic was flawless. If the enemy cannot see your weapons, they cannot target them. If they cannot target them, they cannot destroy them. And if they cannot destroy them, they have to respect them. This was the foundation of their coastal defense strategy. It was a masterpiece of concealment. But this entire strategy relied on one single fragile condition. The doors had to stay closed until the exact moment Iran decided to open them. The moment those doors opened, the silence would break. The moment the silence broke, the shield would vanish. That moment arrived in May. The Iranian military command decided it was time to test their ultimate deterrent. They planned a massive coordinated saturation attack against 3 American guided missile destroyers moving through the strait. The goal was to prove to the world that their secret missile cities were real, functional, and completely unstoppable. They wanted to show that the American Navy could not safely pass through waters Iran claimed to control. The attack was designed to be overwhelming. It was not just about firing a few missiles. It was about unleashing everything at once. Drone swarms were launched from hidden coastal positions, cruise missiles fired from inland bases. Hundreds of fast attack boats rushed out of concealed mountain harbors. Every single element of their naval defense playbook was activated simultaneously. The Iranian commanders watched their screens, waiting for the inevitable destruction of the American ships. They believed math was on their side. We are halfway through this deep dive, and the most shocking part is yet to come. If you are enjoying this breakdown of modern warfare and strategy, drop a comment below telling me which country's military tactics we should analyze next, and make sure you are followed so you never miss an upload. To understand why the Iranian commanders felt so confident, you have to understand the doctrine they built their forces around. It is a concept designed for a smaller navy facing a much larger, more powerful opponent. When you look at an American aircraft carrier strike group, you're looking at the most formidable naval force in human history. A smaller navy cannot build ships big enough or guns strong enough to fight them head-on, so they changed the rules of the game. The Iranian answer to American naval power was saturation. They believe that every defensive system has a limit. An American destroyer has incredible radar and missile interceptors. It can track hundreds of targets at once. It can shoot down multiple incoming threats simultaneously, but it only has a finite number of interceptor missiles in its launch tubes. Once those tubes are empty, the ship is defenseless. The Iranian plan was to simply fire more missiles, more drones, and more boats than the American ships could possibly shoot down. They stored hundreds of fast attack boats in those underground harbors. These are not large naval vessels. They're small, incredibly fast, and heavily armed. The plan was for them to rush out of the tunnels from multiple hidden exits at the exact same time. They would surround the American ships, attacking from every possible angle. The defensive computers on the American ships would be overwhelmed trying to track so many small, fast targets coming from so many different directions. At the same time, dozens of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles would rain down from the sky. The theory was elegant. If you throw 1,000 stones at a glass window, even if the window is made of strong glass, a few stones will get through. The 3 American destroyers in the Strait that day were the perfect targets for this test. They were sailing through the narrow transit corridor relatively close to the Iranian coast. To the Iranian radar operators watching from their hidden bunkers, the American ships looked exposed. They looked vulnerable. The Iranian commanders saw the perfect window of opportunity. They believed the American ships were isolated and that the element of surprise was entirely on their side. They gave the order to open every door. They gave the order to turn on every radar. They gave the order to fire. The strait erupted into chaos. The sky filled with the contrails of hundreds of missiles. The water churned as hundreds of fast boats sped toward the American ships. The Iranian commanders smiled, believing they had just checkmated the most powerful navy on Earth. They believed the American ships were already dead, but the American ships did not panic. They did not break formation. They did not try to run. Instead, they simply turned on their defenses. And waiting for them in the sky above, completely hidden from the Iranian sensors, was the rest of the American fleet. The American destroyers are equipped with the Aegis combat system. This is not just a radar. It is a massive, highly advanced digital brain. It can track hundreds of airborne objects at the same time. It can instantly tell the difference between a flock of birds, a commercial airplane, and an incoming missile. It automatically calculates the speed, trajectory, and threat level of every single object in the sky. Then it assigns the best weapon to destroy each threat. As the Iranian missile swarm approached, the sky around the American destroyers literally lit up with fire. The ships launched their interceptor missiles. The SM-2 and SM-6 missiles roared out of their vertical launch tubes, creating a protective dome of explosions over the fleet. Every single Iranian missile that entered the engagement zone was met with a precise, devastating intercept. The American electronic warfare systems also went to work. They blasted the Iranian missiles with confusing signals, blinding their guidance systems and sending them crashing harmlessly into the sea. But the missiles were only half the attack. The hundreds of fast attack boats were still rushing across the water, trying to get close enough to fire their torpedoes and rockets. This is where the American trap truly revealed itself. The Iranian commanders thought they were attacking isolated ships. They did not realize that the American destroyers were just the bait. Hidden in the clouds above the strait, flying at high altitudes with their radar transponders turned off, were American 35 stealth fighters. Waiting on the water, moving silently just below the horizon, were heavily armed Apache attack helicopters. The moment the Iranian boats left their hidden tunnels and entered the open water, they were instantly painted by the American sensors. The Apaches and the F-35S descended on the boat, swarms like a storm. It was not a battle, it was an execution. The American helicopters fired Hellfire missiles into the fast boats, blowing them to pieces before they could even get within firing range of the destroyers. The F-35S used their advanced sensors to hunt down the remaining boats and the coastal drone launchers. The Iranian saturation attack, the grand strategy that was supposed to overwhelm American defenses, was dismantled in minutes. When the smoke cleared, the American ships continued their journey through the strait. They did not have a single scratch on their hulls. Not one American sailor was injured. Not one ship was damaged. The Iranian attack had completely failed. But the physical failure of the attack was not the real disaster for Iran. The physical damage could be repaired, missiles could be rebuilt, boats could be replaced. The true catastrophe was what happened. The moment the Iranian commanders gave the order to fire, we are approaching the final act of this story, where the real consequences begin to unfold. If this video is giving you a new perspective on how modern conflicts are actually won and lost, please share it on your social media or send it directly to a friend who follows military news. Your support helps this page grow and reach more curious minds. Remember the core of the Iranian strategy. The weapons were not the main asset. The concealment was the main asset. For 20 years, the American military had been trying to find these underground bases. They had flown satellites, launched drones, and placed underwater sensors. They had spent billions trying to map the Iranian coastal defenses, but they could not find what was hidden in the dark. When the Iranian commanders turned on their radars to guide the missiles, they sent out massive bursts of electronic energy. When they launched the cruise missiles, the engines created huge thermal heat signatures. When the fast boats rushed out of the tunnels, their movements were tracked by the advanced sonar and radar on the American ships and aircraft. In a matter of minutes, the Iranian military did something they had spent 2 decades avoiding. They lit up the dark. Every single radar system that was turned on was instantly detected, and its exact location was recorded. Every single missile launch site was identified by the heat of its engine. Every single hidden harbor was mapped by tracking the exact path the fast boats took as they entered the open water. The American surveillance network, which had been waiting patiently for this exact moment, absorbed every piece of data. The American military did not just defend against the attack. They used the attack to complete their targeting database. By the end of the day, the United States had the precise GPS coordinates for every single underground bunker, every tunnel entrance, every command center, and every hidden boat dock along the Iranian coast. The ultimate shield of concealment was gone forever. The secret missile cities were no longer a secret. The American response to this intelligence windfall was swift and brutal. The United States launched a series of retaliatory strikes against the newly identified targets. The military called it a measured response, but the results were devastating because the Americans now knew exactly where to aim. Their precision munitions struck the weak points of the underground facilities, the ventilation shafts were destroyed, the tunnel entrances collapsed, the command centers were wiped out. The physical infrastructure that took 20 years and billions of dollars to build was severely damaged in a matter of hours. But to understand why the Iranian commanders made the fatal decision to open the doors in the first place, you have to look away from the ocean and look at the streets of Tehran. You have to understand the crushing economic reality that was pushing the Iranian government to the brink. This attack was not born out of military strength. It was born out of absolute desperation. The Iranian economy was in a state of total collapse. The national currency had lost almost all of its value. It took over 1 million rials to buy a single US dollar. This kind of currency crash destroys a country from the inside out. It means that any money ordinary citizens had saved in their banks was suddenly worthless. It means that the cost of importing basic goods skyrockets overnight. Inflation was not just high, it was catastrophic. Official numbers showed inflation near 70%. But for the everyday items people actually need to survive, the numbers were much worse. The price of basic bread and grain had more than doubled. Cooking oil prices had tripled. Ordinary families were being pushed into extreme poverty. The professional middle class, the people who run the businesses and keep the country functioning, were losing everything. Shops were closing, people were being laid off. The digital infrastructure of the country was shutting down, making it impossible for modern businesses to operate. The human cost of this economic collapse was devastating. Citizens were reporting that they could no longer afford basic meat or fresh vegetables. Medical care and therapy sessions became impossible to pay for. The country was suffocating under the weight of its own financial failure. Inside the highest levels of the Iranian government, a massive internal war was brewing. The civilian leaders and the economic officials could see the disaster unfolding. The governor of the central bank, the man responsible for managing the country's money, looked at the numbers and realized the truth. He understood that the military conflict and the resulting blockades were destroying the country. He actually went to the president and urged him to take urgent steps to stabilize the economy. He told the president that the only way to save the country from total financial ruin was to restore internet access and pursue a peace deal with the United States. Think about how extreme the situation must be for the head of the central bank to beg the president to make a deal with the enemy. This was not a political preference. It was a mathematical necessity. The financial experts were screaming that the country had less than a decade before the economy completely collapsed beyond any hope of repair. But the military commanders, the leaders of the Revolutionary Guard, refused to listen. They were trapped in their own ideology. They believed that showing weakness at the negotiating table would destroy their power. They believed that the only way to force the United States to lift the blockades and ease the economic pressure was to prove that Iran could make the cost of war too high for America to bear. They saw the American destroyers in the Strait and saw a chance to change the narrative. They believed that if they could sink or damage an American warship, the United States would be forced to back down. They believed it would show the Iranian people that the military was strong and capable. They believed it would force the Gulf states and European countries to pressure the U.S. into a ceasefire. Every single one of those calculations was wrong. The attack did not scare the United States. It did not impress the Gulf states. In fact, it did the exact opposite. When the Iranian drones and missiles flew toward the American ships, they also flew near the territories of neighboring Gulf countries. The Gulf states saw this not as a show of Iranian strength, but as a reckless act of aggression that put their own security at risk. Instead of pushing for a ceasefire, the Gulf states became more determined to support the American military presence to protect themselves. Inside Iran, the government propaganda machine went into overdrive. State television showed crowds celebrating in the squares, claiming that the Iranian military had severely damaged the American ships and forced them to retreat. They created a fake narrative of victory to keep the public calm. But in the modern world, you cannot completely control the flow of information. Even with the internet heavily restricted, people were using virtual private networks and satellite connections to find the truth. They saw the videos of the American ships sailing away, completely undamaged. They saw the reports of the devastating American counterstrikes. The gap between the government's fake victory and the observable reality began to widen. The citizens who were already suffering from triple-digit food inflation and empty bank accounts started to realize they were being lied to. The military's credibility, which was entirely based on the myth of the invincible secret missile cities, began to crack. Now, the Iranian leadership is trapped in a corner with no good exits. They have a few remaining options, but every single one of them makes their situation worse. They could try to attack the oil pipelines of Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, but doing so would formally drag those wealthy, heavily armed nations into a direct war against Iran. It would unite the entire region against them. They could try to lay more mines in the shipping lanes, but the American military has already deployed advanced unmanned underwater systems that detect and map the mines in real time. Every time an Iranian boat goes out to lay a mine, it reveals its location to the American sensors, and it becomes an easy target for the helicopters waiting above. They could try to cut the underwater internet cables that connect the Gulf to the rest of the world, but doing so would be an act of war against the entire international community. It would instantly destroy whatever diplomatic protection Iran currently receives from countries like China and Russia at the United Nations. Every card they have left to play results in a worse outcome. The strategy of coastal denial has completely failed. The doctrine of saturation has been proven useless against modern American defenses. And the ultimate secret of the underground missile cities has been exposed to the world. The doors that were sealed for 20 years are now wide open. The locations of every bunker are filed in American targeting computers. The knowledge of where those bases are will never expire. The Iranian commanders can try to rebuild, they can try to dig new tunnels, and they can try to move their weapons, but they can never get the secrecy back. The foundation of their entire military strategy has been destroyed by their own hands. The real battle now is not happening in the Strait. It is happening inside the bunkers in the banks of Tehran. It is a battle between a desperate civilian government that knows the country is economically dying and a stubborn military leadership that refuses to admit their grand strategy has failed. The central bank governor is begging for peace. The military commanders are hiding in their bunkers, running their propaganda machines, and pretending they want a victory that never happened. The gap between those two realities is where the regime's terminal crisis is living right now. The American military has sent a clear message. The targeting database is complete. The next time the Iranian military activates its systems, the response will be even more devastating. The window for a diplomatic solution is closing rapidly. The economic pressure is crushing the population. The military myth is shattered. Iran spent 20 years and billions of dollars building the perfect hidden fortress. They believed that keeping their weapons in the dark would keep them safe, but they forgot the most fundamental rule of power. A weapon you cannot use is just a very expensive paperweight, and a secret you are forced to reveal is a secret you no longer have. The doors are open, the shadows are gone, and America was waiting the entire time.